We continue now at the top of Daf 25a Daf in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 25a. The Gemara is continuing a statement from Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav says that let's say the Eved Kanani has a Yiseris, which means to say he has an extra finger. V'chotcha, and the master cuts off the finger. Eved Yotze bohen lecheres, the Eved goes free. Amar Rav Huna says V'hushen isperes al gav hayad. That's only true if that extra finger is in line with the other fingers. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Save de Nezunya lo asu lepirkei de Rav Chisda. The elders of Nezunya did not come to the shir of Rav Chisda. Amar leila Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Chisda said to Rav Hamnuna, Zil Tsaninu, go and ostracize them. Rashi says, Zil Tsaninu emor aleim, say to them, Lehi sager v'leishev avayis, to close themselves off, to sit in the house. V'zel lashon nidoy l'talmid chacham. This is the way you use a language of nidoy for a talmid chacham. You have to say it in a respectful manner. Tsaninu is a more respectful manner. Kid amar b'moed katan, like it says in moed katan, leimor lo derech kavod. You should say to him in a respectful manner, He sager v'sheb b'veischa, close yourself off and sit in your house. So in any case, Rav Chisda said to Rav Huna that they have to be ostracized because they're not coming to the shir. Azal Amar Lahu, so he went and he said to them, My time alo asu Rabbanan lepirka, what's the reason that the Rabbanan, what's the reason that you are not coming to the shir? Amru lei, they said to him, Amai nesi, why should we come? Deva'inan mine milsa, because we ask him something. V'lo pashat lon, and he doesn't give us an answer. Amar Lahu, so Rav Hamnuna said to them, Mi bo'isu minoi midi, have you ever asked me anything? V'lo pashitnu lahu, and I didn't give you an answer. Bo minei, so they asked him the following question, and this was with regards to an Eved Kanani. Eved shesersu rabo bebeitzim mahu. Let's say you have an Eved Kanani, and his master castrates him by the beitzim. What's the halach in such a situation? Kimum shebegoloi dami, is that considered to be an exposed mum? Or or not, is that considered to be a hidden mum, and therefore he would not go free? Rashi says, Kimumin shabegali dami, is that considered to be an exposed mum, an exposed blemish, sharei taluyan bekis, because they're hanging in the kiss, v'nikarmi bachutz, it's something that you can see from the outside. Olo, or maybe not, ho'elu tmunim b'socha kiss, because they're still hidden within the kiss. And so therefore, again, that's the question over here, in a situation of an Eved that's castrated by the master, is that considered to be an exposed blemish or not? Does the Eved go free or not? Lo have biyade, so Rav Hamnuna did not know the answer to this question. Amru lo, they said to him, Mashmech, what's your name? Amar lahu, he said to them, Hamnuna, my name is Hamnuna. Amru le, they said to him, Lav Hamnuna ela Karnuna. You're not Hamnuna, rather you're Karnuna. Rashi says, Karnuna is Yoshev Kronos Atav V'lo Bal Torah. It's just those who sit out by the street corners, people who are not learned, they're not Balei Torah. That's what they referred to him as. Asal Lakami de Rav Chisda, so he came before Rav Chisda, meaning Rav Hamnuna came before Rav Chisda to get the answer to this question. Amar Le said to him, Masnisa bo minach, they actually asked you a question that you can answer from a brisa. Rashi says, Masnisa bo minach garsina, and the proper gear says, Masnisa bo minach demi brisa de tani Allah de Masnisa. We're really going to learn the answer from a brisa that's going on the following Mishnah. Rebbe Yomer Af Haseros Yoleflat, so the statement that Rebbe says, even when it comes to castration, which we'll see in a moment, the answer essentially comes from this brisa. Titanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Esrim v'arba rasha evarim sheba'adam. There are 24 limbs in a person. Kulam ein metamin misham michya. And all of them, there is no tumah, talking about the tumah of tzaras. There's something called michya when you have a portion of healthy skin. These 24 limbs, they don't have that tumah of michya. V'eluhem, and they are as follows. Rasha Yetzbos Yadayim V'Raglayim. First of all, the tips of the fingers and the toes. That's already 20. V'Rasha Yaznayim, and then the tips of the ears. That's 21. V'Rosh Hachotim, the tip of the nose. That's 22. V'Rosh Hagvia, that refers to the tip of the male member. That's 23. V'Rasha Dadim, and the tips of the breast. That's 24. Shebeisha, again talking about a female when we're talking about the Dadim. Rabbi Yehuda says Af Shebeish. Rabbi Yehuda says when you're talking about the tips of the breasts, that doesn't only apply to women, it applies to men as well, in terms of counting it among the 24 Rasha Evarim. And Rashi explains, Ein metamin misham michya, these 24 limbs, they don't have tumah because of michya. It really means the tips of these 24 limbs. Shem echad min hanegoyim, this is the name of one of the negoyim, of one of the kind of tzaras. K'dechsiv, it says, it's written in the pasuk, michias basar chai baseis. It talks about the michias basar in the seis. The seis is a kind of tzaras, so it's like there's a portion of healthy skin within the tzaras. Uchsibban, it's written over there, l'chol marei einei hakohen. It says that it has to be visible visible to the entire eye of the Kohen, meaning to say, Shetei Kula Niris Kachas, meaning you can see that entire Michya in one shot. You don't have to turn the body to see it from different angles. Prat Lemichya Shehi B'Makam HaMeshupah. The point of the pasuk is to exclude if you have a healthy piece of skin that is at an area which is sloped, V'yored L'chol Tzad, so it goes in different directions. That would be the tips of these limbs. Shein Yachol Liros Rosh HaNega V'Raglav Kachas. The point is you can't see the top and the bottom of the nega at the same time. And so that's true in all of these areas. V'Rosh Aznaim, Sfasa Ozen, that would be the tip of the ear. Rosh Kavia, again, that's the gid, that's the male member. V'Rashay Dadim Shebeisha, and the tips of the breasts of a woman. Avol Shebeish, Einon Bolton Kolkach. According to the Tanakama, those of a man, they don't slope enough. Ve'ein Zeh Shipua, that's not considered something that's enough of a Shipua that you can't see it all at once. And again, Rabbi Yehuda says, even those of a man, they count as well. They're considered sloped enough as well. And on this Mishnah, we have a brisa. V'Tani Allah was taught on this Mishnah the following brisa. Bekulam, by all of these Esrim V'Arba Rashay Evarim, let's say the Eved loses this particular Aver from the master, so Eved Yotze B'hem L'Cheiris. So again, in that situation, if the master inflicts a permanent damage on these Rashay Evarim, the Eved is going to go free. And Rashi says L'Cheiris goes free, Dekulan, by all of them. Im Katsu Lo Rabo, let's say the master severs the particular limb, Mumsha Begolahu, the point is that's an exposed blemish, Ve'eno Choser, and something that's not going to heal. And so therefore, again, the Bryce is saying in all of these cases, the Eved is going to go free. And Rebbe says, Afaserus, the same is true by castration, and Rashi says, Rebbe Omer Afaserus, Mosef Al Elul Inyan Eved. That also counts in terms of an Eved Kanani, and so therefore you see already from this brisa that this would set the Eved free. V'shein v'ayin. Now, what about the tooth and the eye? That doesn't seem to be listed here. Lo itzrach leila Rebbe limnos b'tosefta. Rebbe doesn't even need to count this in the Tosefta. The v'hed yaksiv, that's already written explicitly in the pasuk. V'zil kari beiravu. You could just read the Torah, you could just read the Chumash, and you can see shein v'ayin. V'tanakama lo poligba. The Tanakama certainly wouldn't argue about that, and that's why that is not listed over here. And the brisa continues. Ben Azai Omer, Ben Azai says af haloshen. The same is true by the tongue. That also is sometimes exposed, and so if the master would sever the tongue, that would also set the Eved free. Rashi says, Af haloshen shedarko leiros keshumedaber. You can see the tongue when a person speaks. Umumsha begolahu. Therefore, it's considered to be an exposed blemish. And the Gemara continues, V'Rebbe loshen lo. Does Rebbe not consider the tongue to be an exposed part of the body? U'Ramina, we have the following contradiction. Hare misha yamazev v'nitza hazal piv. Let's say a person is sprinkling the mechatos, that is the waters that are used to purify somebody who is tamei mace, and let's say that mechatos, it goes on the person's mouth. Rebbe Omer Hiza. Rebbe says that is a good sprinkling. V'chachamim Omrim lo Hiza. The Chachamim say that is not considered to be a good sprinkling. And the Gemara says, my lav is it not? Al Lashona, when we say that the waters of the mechatos, again the mechatos that come from the para aduma, when we say that it goes on the person's mouth, so don't we mean to say the person's tongue? And Rebbe is saying that the tongue is considered to be exposed, and that's why it's considered to be a good sprinkling. And the Gemara says, lo, no, that's not what we're talking about, al sefasav. What we're actually talking about is when it says that the sprinkling goes al piv, it really means al sefasav, on his lips. And Rebbe is saying the lips are considered to be an exposed part of the body. But the Gemara says al sefasav pshita, but if we're saying on the lips, that's obvious. Rebbe doesn't even need to say that. The Gemara says, Ma'u detema, no, what might you have said? Zimna decholim sefase, sometimes a person tightly closes his lips, maybe it shouldn't be considered to be an exposed part of the body. Kamash malon, and so Rebbe is teaching us that that is considered to be a good hazah. But the Gemara says you still can't say that v'atanya, but we learned in a brisa al lishono. It says explicitly that Rebbe is talking about a case where the hazah goes on the person's tongue, and so again you see clearly Rebbe holds the tongue is considered to be exposed. V'otanya, and further we learned in a brisa v'shanitel rov haloshen. This is talking about the blemishes of bechor, and it says over there that if the majority of the tongue is taken, so that's considered to be a blemish, and again that would imply that the tongue is considered to be an exposed part of the body. Rebbe Omer, and Rebbe says rov hamedaber shebelashon. When we talk about the majority of the tongue, we're talking about the majority of the part of the tongue that's used for speaking. That would be the tip of the tongue. But again, in any case, it seems that the lashon, the tongue, is considered to be an exposed part of the body according to Rebbe. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather Rebbe Omer Sirus. When Rebbe says that castration is considered something that sets the Eved free, Velomi Boy Lashon, he means to say Sirus, but I don't even need to say the tongue. Of course Rebbe agrees that that also would set the Eved free. And it's Ben Azai who disagrees with Rebbe when it comes to Sirus. Ben Azai Amar Lashon, and Ben Azai says the tongue, that's considered something that sets the Eved free. Avol Sirus Lo, but castration would not set the Eved free, because again, that's not considered to be an exposed part of the body, according to Ben Azai. Umay af, and what does it mean when Ben Azai says af? Akamaisa, Ben Azai is going on the first part of the brisa, meaning all of the other limbs that set the Eved free, and Ben Azai says even the tongue. Ben Azai doesn't mean to say even the tongue, including Sirus as well. Ben Azai disagrees when it comes to Sirus. But the Gemara says, if so, Nikdama de Ben Azai Beresha, then Ben Azai should actually come before Rebbe in the structure of the brisa. Ben Azai should say Af HaLashon, because he's going on all the other limbs, and then saying also the tongue, but he disagrees by Sirus, and then the brisa should bring Rebbe that Rebbe even includes Sirus. And the Gemara says to that, Tana Shamala de Rebbe v'Kava v'Shamala de Ben Azai v'Tani. What happened was the Tana first heard the ruling of Rebbe and put it into the brisa, then heard the ruling of Ben Azai and put that into the brisa, even though that's not the proper order, it should have been switched. Mishnah lo zazam imekoma. Once it was already taught, we didn't move around the order, we don't move the Mishnah from its place. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ula says, Hakol modim b'loshen le'inyan tumma d'goli hu etzel hasheretz. Everybody agrees when it comes to the tongue, in terms of tumma, that's considered to be an exposed part of the body in reference to the sheretz, meaning to say if a sheretz touches the tongue, the person is going to be considered tamei. My time, what's the reason? Asher yiga bo amar achmon, it says that it touches him. V'hainami bar negiyahu, and the tongue is considered something that can be touched, and therefore again, if the sheretz, the item that's tamei, touches the person on his tongue, that person is going to be tamei. And le'inyan tvila, everybody agrees when it comes to immersion in the mikvah, ketamun dami, that the tongue is considered to be not exposed, meaning you don't have to open your mouth when you go into the mikvah, when you go into the waters of the mikvah. My time, what's the reason? V'rachatz besaro b'mayim amar achmona, because it says that if the person's basar has to be bathed in water, ma besaro me'avroi, just like the person's basar means to say his flesh, that's from the outside. Afkol me'avroi, so too everything that has to be in the mikvah waters has to be from the outside, and the tongue, the person doesn't have to open his mouth in order to immerse the tongue in the waters of the mikvah. Lo ne'echleku ela linyan hazah, the machlokus between Rebbe and the Rabbanan is only when it comes to sprinkling of the waters of the mechatos on somebody who's tamei meis. Rebbe medami lo l'tumah. Rebbe compares that to the situation of tumah, just like the tongue is considered to be something that can contract tumah. It's considered to be exposed in that fashion. Therefore, also by hazah, the hazah would be good if it touches the person's tongue. V'Rabbanan medami lo l'tvila, and the Rabbanan, they compare the tongue to immersion, just like by immersion the waters of the mikveh don't have to touch the tongue. That's considered to be not an exposed part of the body. So too when it comes to hazah, the sprinkling of the mechatos is not going to be considered a good hazah if it touches the tongue. And the Gemara says they're both arguing about how to interpret the following pasuk. The pasuk says, V'hiza hatar al atame v'gomer. It says that the person who's pure is going to sprinkle the mechatos on the person who's impure. Rebbe Sava, Rebbe holds, V'hiza hatar al atame bayom hashlishu vayom hashvi v'chito. That what does it say in the pasuk? It says that the person whose tar is going to sprinkle on the person who's tamei bayom hashlishu vayom hashvi. And so therefore what we're essentially saying is v'chito. What we're essentially saying is we're comparing it to tumah. We're saying V'hiza hatar al atame. We're comparing the sprinkling of the mechatos to impurity, just like it's considered exposed. The tongue is considered exposed by impurity, so too it's considered exposed when it comes to the sprinkling of the mechatos. Rabbanan Savri, but the Rabbanan hold v'chito bayom hashvi v'chibes begadav v'rachatz b'mayim. It says that the person purifies himself on the seventh day and then he immerses in water, and so therefore they're comparing it to the immersion in the mikvah, just like the tongue is considered to be not an exposed part of the body when it comes to the immersion in the mikvah, so too when it comes to the sprinkling of the mechatos. And the Gemara says, "V'Rabbanan nami nedami l'tumah." But the Rabbanan also, why don't they follow Rebbe and compare it to becoming tamei? Tahara mi tahara havalei l'melech, because they say simply that we should learn purity from purity. Just like over here, you're sprinkling the mechatos to make a person tar. So too, when it comes to immersing in the mikvah, you're doing that to become tar, and therefore we compare the two of them. And the Gemara continues, V'Rebbe nedami l'tvila, and Rebbe also, why doesn't he compare the sprinkling of the mechatas to immersing in the mikveh? V'chibes begadav hifsika inyan, because he holds that when the pasuk says v'chibes begadav, so that is like a stop in terms of the reading of the pasuk, and therefore the way the pasuk should be read is v'hiza hatar l'atame v'yom hashlishu v'yom hashvi v'chito, and you stop over there, and you don't continue reading. V'chibes begadav becomes a new sentence, and so therefore again, according to Rebbe, what you're going to compare is you're going to compare the process of hazah to the process of becoming tameh. But the Gemara still continues, V'sava Rebbe le'inyan tvila ketam and dami. But does Rebbe really hold that when it comes to immersing, the tongue is considered like a part of the body that's concealed? V'amar Ravin, but didn't Ravin say, Amar Ravada, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, the Ravada said, that Rabbi Yitzchak said, Maisa b'shivcha shel beis Rebbe, that there was an incident by the maidservant in the house of Rebbe, Shetavla v'alsa v'nimtza etzem ben shineh, that she immersed in the mikveh. When she came out, it turned out that there was a bone between her teeth. V'tzricha Rebbe tvila acheres, and Rebbe required another immersion, meaning to say it sounds like the area within the mouth is considered to be a part of the body that needs to be immersed in the mikveh as well. It's not considered to be a concealed part of the body. And the Gemara says to that, Nihi debias mayim lo ba'inan. Granted that you actually don't need the water to go into the mouth. That's what we mean that it's considered an area that's concealed. But nevertheless, makom haroi lovo bo mayim ba'inan. But still, Rebbe says that it does need to be an area where theoretically the water could enter, and therefore if the bone is between the teeth, that prevents it from being a good tevilah. Kidder Rabbi Zera, that follows what Rabbi Zera said when it comes to menachos, when it comes to carbon mincha. The Yom Rabbi Zera, because Rabbi Zera says, Kol haroi labila, as long as the carbon mincha is able to be mixed, meaning you have a proportion of flour and oil that's possible to mix, ein bila ma'akeves bo, so you don't actually have to mix. Even if you don't mix it together, it's still a kosher carbon. The point just is that it has to be able to be mixed. V'she'ein haroi labila, but if it's not able to be mixed, bila ma'akeves bo, so then the fact that you can't mix it is ma'akev, and it is a problem. It will not be a kosher carbon mincha. And the point over here is here as well when it comes to tevilah, even though you don't actually have to immerse the inside of the mouth in the waters of the mikveh, but theoretically the water has to be able to come into all areas that are within the mouth, and therefore if there's a bone between the teeth, it's going to be a problem. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chof Hey Amud Beis.